Alright now. Hello everyone. This is Dog. Immortal is currently giving me control of the episode for today. Because he's doing something I do not know what. But I'm here to tell you about myself and the others, my predecessors and the future users of Kaze. Now, this is the Immortal Tales Episode 2, The Angel's Saga. Shall we begin? So, as I've mentioned, I am Dark. Technically the third of the Dark Angels. We'll go each of in order, from first to last, and he's gonna be mad at that, but yeah. So, our story begins in technically what would be in the same setting as Demon Slayer. That's where our whole story begins. First of us being a man named Kuruto Kurame. But we, among the others that have Kaze, just call him Kurame. He was a boy in a small village on the side of a river. Immortal did do some Japanese geology to try and find out what river a long time ago, but he's long since forgot the name. But Karame's village had always been plagued by monster attacks or demon attacks. And it was often blamed on him and his mother. You see, Karame was born as what the villagers called a cursed child, because no one knew his father, and it was just his mother. So he was often shunned and outcasted. Worth it. But anyways, I'm sorry. Karame had always been a kind boy nonetheless. He tried to prove himself by helping everyone in the village. Always the first to assist and always the first to try and make his village a better place. Usually by being the one to first assist people on their farms, first one to help others complete their chores, and just all around being the person that everyone in the village relied on, but no one ever thanked. In a way, it's like one of those hated child type stories, you could say. He was always the one doing the chores, but never the one getting the praise. And oftentimes when he did them for others, he would only get the scraps of food as payment. But then tragedy struck. The village had yet another demon attack, and this time it had killed his mother. But Kurame had actually captured a demon with his own hands. He captured a demon that was as black as night, with a wide set of horns and covered in feathers. This was Kaze, the creature of shadows that I hold. Now, I believe Immortal described Kaze kind of like a venom. Kaze's way of doing things as like venom. The key difference is we don't have to turn venom turn into a full suit like Venom. We just have to have Kaze attached to us, and then we become nearly unstoppable. So with Kurame, he was the first and had made a deal with Kaze. Because after capturing Kaze, he brought him into the town, hidden under a tarp to try and keep the beast from seeing which way he was going and trying to, in a sense, blind him of his surroundings. But that did work greatly, because they never knew where he was going while moving. Sorry, my throat's a bit stopped up, so I may be coughing a lot this episode, but I needed to get it out. But anyways, back to what I was saying. So, the villagers scorned Kurame, thinking he was the whole reason, further blaming him for catching them, instead of letting them just take what they wanted and leaving without actually killing anyone. Usually they would take the livestock or take the homeless and keep them off the streets. It was a very corrupt village. But after Kurame had taken Kaze, the villagers blamed him for them actually finding out that a person was dead. They thought that he had killed her and blamed it on Kaze. They thought that Kurame had been jealous of the girl because she had an actual family that cared about her, as they put it. So, defeated and realizing he's never been truly welcome there, he left. He took Kaze in the cart and left. He obeyed the villagers' command to get out of the town, realizing he wouldn't be able to change their minds, and that they were too stuck in their ways, and too reliant on pinning the blame on him for every wrongdoing. And he had enough. He was tired of hearing it. The blame, the hatred, all of it. So, after wheeling the cart into the woods, he rested under a tree. A wisteria tree, to be precise. And then Kaze spoke. He asked the child why they scorned him, why they mocked him, and why they called him a monster. even when he had done something so heroic for that village, where he stood up against a creature that not many would stand up against, and caught it. Then Kurame said to him the exact things I told you. How he had always helped everyone in that village. How they always treated him like he was the problem. Kaze then offered a solution. Not revenge, but the ability to just move on. He granted Kurame a gift by letting Kaze scratch a mark on his hand and drawing blood. Kaze then fused himself with Kurame, having essentially Kaze flowing through his bloodstream, making him a creature of both darkness and shadow, and making him the first Archangel. But he is better known as the Devourer of Demons during his time. Kurame was a demon slayer, because after a while he developed his own breathing style, so to speak. To kind of help you understand a bit, he developed his own breathing style and fighting style. Using a scythe, as he had worked the fields for so long, he was able to bring the one item with him, that very scythe. He used it in combat, fighting other creatures and monsters and demons and various creatures from Japanese folklore as well. Basically, if it was something that would eat someone or harm others, he would be there to stop it. And he would be there to ensure that the person in danger survived. Now, granted, the only problem was Kaze and him didn't agree on certain things, but they were always minor, and they always figured out how to solve it in the end. This seems like a good spot to build. Alright, I'm gonna build Immortal a house here. So, afterward, they more or less follow along Tanjiro's journey in the Demon Slayer universe. Training with him, helping him in the journey, up until the final part. I won't give you the full, long explanation of everything, but to put it simply, Kurame and Kaze were there for almost all of the Demon Slayer journey, though they themselves were there to assist and not fully Demon Slayers, so to speak. In a way, they killed demons, but they had a special way of doing it that was not aligned with the actual core premise of the story. Alright. Let's see. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I really need to make a chest room. But after a while, he, Kurame, had realized that all of the demons started to disappear, fade into myth and legend, and then kind of realized that he never really got the chance to live a life of his own. So, him and Kaze had agreed to go their separate ways. But Kaze had lost his physical form for being attached to someone for so long. Which ended up causing Kaze to need to be bound into an object. So, he was bound into the very scythe that Kurame had wielded for so long. Which then carries us on to the next person. Coulson Rafuto. The Assassin and the Raven. These are going to be fairly short because of how much of the story is kind of seeped in with other forms of media, but I'll do my best to still explain as much as I can. So, Coulson Rafuto. He was originally just a regular person. Not the type of guy you would think to be special, to say. He was kind. Almost like, and was always willing to help. Also, he was a descendant from Eivor from the Valhalla, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Which meant he could use the machine that they use in the game. I think that's, again, I don't know what's safe to say and what's not, but for those who play Assassin's Creed, he can see the memories of that person and relive them, which is how he was trained, alongside a group of others like him that were trained similar to the core plot of Assassin's Creed 1. And I think 1 and 2, actually. To where the main character was trained by the memories of his ancestors. They were all trained that way. He had very many enemies, and often fought against great objects of power. But because of Kaze's help, he was able to tap into that old world tech, so to speak. And then able to adapt it to be used for him. In a way, consider Kaze as like a sort of virus to that type of tech. Because it was often blood. Because I know in the what was it? In the Valhalla series, there was some things that could only be... No, wait, in some games, only certain people could use certain objects, so to speak. Like, kind of how the only people who could really tap into the Apple of Eden was Ezio and his family. Or in his bloodline. So, it's kind of that system that Kaze was able to override and cause some other items from that period to be usable by him and Coulson. Then we have me. Dark. Now, I personally have a lot to unpack. For starters, I am a SCP researcher. And I am, well, not officially, and there's nowhere written that I would be yet. I would like to see that at some point. But for now, I've not actually got an actual entry in the SCP archives. But before all that, I was a creepypasta for Slenderman. Or one of the proctors, I believe they were called. For him. And even before that, I was on my own. You see, I found Kaze in an antique shop. I found it during winter, where I had gloves on. I still remember the day I got him. It was a cold day. Me and my family were going antique shopping for uranium glass and all sorts of other fun little oddities and treasures. And I found a scythe. One of pure... that looked like it had black steel. It was about as tall as me, but it looked cool. And was actually reasonably priced for what I considered to be a replica of a video game scythe that someone sold to an antique shop for weird reasons that I could not fathom. But anyways, after I brought it home and brought it to my room, that's where I met Kaze. He had told me all the stories of these old users, and then explained to me everything that he had seen, and told me I had become the new Dark Angel, the new host for him, as he specifically said. All I needed to do was take his hand. But I chose not to. I said I didn't want it because I had things I planned to do with my life. He understood, but he did say the scythe itself was not cursed, and I didn't have to do anything else if I didn't wish to be the angel, or the carrier of darkness. So I went on living my life as normal. Went in high school for such. It was normal for about a week. Then I noticed things started happening. Creatures outside my house that I thought were myth and legend, all coming after one thing. I come to find out they were all after the one thing that I had. One cursed object that even he, because they didn't know who would cause such problems. The scythe. The scythe itself had brought creatures from other worlds. Creatures like from the Mayfair Watcher Society, mostly. Those type of creatures. Various Trevor Henderson projects. Various creatures from folklores. And many different demons and grotesque beings, all the like, trying to grab one scythe. So, I had to stop them. Make sure they didn't get to my home and harm my sibling or my grandparents, which is similar to how Immortal lives. I'm not going to say more than that, other than just consider me and Immortal to be very close in terms of lives. Or timeline-wise. But, continuing on, I had to protect my family. So, without taking Kaze's gift, so to speak, I could still use the scythe like normal. He told me he had been used to slay countless creatures. And even though I wasn't able to really have the abilities or direct access to the memories, he was still able to train me. So, Kaze had given me a very, very strict training regimen that taught me how to fight, how to live, how to survive this new world that I had been set into. So, after a while, me killing a siren head, a cartoon cat, a couple of various big Charlies, one of the things that are better known as Scoobies in the Mayfair Watcher Society. Some of those bureaucracy gnomes, I think they were, and a bunch of other demons and creatures, all trying to get into that house. Eventually, I fought against something that was too powerful even for me. Something that I could not stop. And so, I was forced to accept Kaze's deal, to make myself strong enough to defend my family, to protect those that I care about, and to ensure that the creatures did not escape. Little did I know what cost that would employ, and what new life I had in store for me. A week or so after I accepted Kaze's gift, so to speak, I then had to defend against more creatures. But I started enjoying them. I considered it a way to hone my skills, to create more cool gear and weaponry. Like the axe I made from the rims around the Siren Head Siren. Or the coat I had made from Cartoon Cat's fur after defeating him in some very miraculous way. Even with Kaze, it was a tough fight. Then there was also the kind of like Kratos blades I made from the jawbone of a big Charlie by breaking it in half and using the teeth as the actual blade side type thing, and then tying it to a chain that made of Kaze's, and then tying it around a chain or string that's kind of like one of Kaze's tentacles, but it's more or less, it's literally that actually, but it's just limp and used to whip around like a chain. But yeah. Then there's also the various bone fragments I get, or the arrow I got from making the tip of it a stinger of a Scooby tail. Or the, no, not Scooby, the giant little demon things, I'll just call them. Or the giant cell, like, they divide by splitting off, I remember that, but I can't remember what they were also called. I just don't feel comfortable calling them Scoobies at the moment. But it's like a giant gray creature with thin hair and a very venomous sting, from what it was described as being. But anyways, I have a bunch of arrows made from the tips of that I always retrieve. Then one day, I was approached by someone. A woman. She had red fairy wings, a kind of risque outfit, so to speak, and a whip. I had read stories of this person along the creepypasta files. In my dimension, at least. I know it's not in your dimension before you go looking. But I knew she was known as the Blood Fairy. A person who was always hidden in various clubs and brothels, I believe they were called. Always stealthy and unsuspecting. Apparently, the way she hunted for people was by marking them, so to speak. I'm not going to go into detail on how she kills, but I think you get the idea from where I've mentioned. You see, she had heard about me from me more or less flying around and using my power in secret and becoming a urban legend in my hometown. She wanted to recruit me to join Slenderman's side and help, so to speak. I initially refused until there were some complications, so to speak, with various different entities trying to attack. It was only a matter of time before something of great power did come after the scythe. And it did. Zalgo did. He came after my family. and almost got them. So, in exchange for ensuring that my family wouldn't get caught up in that battle, I agreed to join Slenderman's little group. Then a lot of random stuff happens in the mansion. Stuff that I don't care to mention. Just random chaos that you would usually see in the gacha videos. And me essentially falling in love with the Blood Fairy, whom, come to find out, actually held Kaze's lover. Lunetta. The mistress of darkness and shadow. You see, Lumine was... I apologize, it has been a while since Immortal has thought of names for them. Or thought about their names and such. But anyways, Lunetta had been Kaze's lover. They had been together since the beginning, but they had gotten separated after what Kodame had done to catch Kaze. So, they were never able to reunite, which led to Kaze thinking she had long forgotten about him. And making the lovers separated and forget about each other for a while. Until Dark and Kaze meet Eliza and Bella. Eliza and Lunetta. In which they fell in love and Dark and Eliza discovered a sort of clause in their arrangement, so to speak. Because Kaze and Lunetta were in love and still were, they accidentally influenced their host to fall in love with the other persons, with the host of their lover. In other words, it meant that Dark had inadvertently fallen in love with Eliza. Even though they didn't know it at the time, but this will come up again in one of the future ones. 1 second, quick water break. But after being a proctor for Slenderman for so long, and finding that all the creatures stopped attacking my family, I realized I could move on. But knowing these creatures and studying them had eventually become such a big part of my life to where the only obvious place I could really work and enjoy it was the SCP Foundation. So, I joined them. And became a researcher for the Foundation. I eventually became... After they discovered Kaze, I eventually became an SCP, but was still allowed to carry out my duties as a researcher. Similar to some of the other researchers that I've read about and have met, but nonetheless, they are all good friends. But you kinda need good friends in a place like that. Anyways, sorry, I blacked out for a second. I eventually became a researcher. I said I became a researcher at the SCP Foundation. But I essentially became the one that everyone went to negotiate with entities due to my near indestructibility and overall physical prowess. I believe that's the right word. Yeah, that's the right word. So I became the first person sent out to negotiate with unknown entities and groups. And also one who did interviews with those who could speak, and sometimes those who couldn't, by using Kaze to translate their thoughts for me. Which actually I should mention, one power that was kinda developed over time, but wasn't really as strong until the, like to say, 6th or 7th user, was the ability to read minds from touching someone. Not like the inappropriate touching for any of the degenerates thinking that. I mean just anyone touching the hand of a dark angel. Anyone who touched our hands had inadvertently given us access to their memories. Hence the reason why we would always be seen wearing gloves. It wasn't as strong with me, but I noticed it early on and started wearing gloves full time for that reason. Anyways. Then, the next thing, let's see. Considering that's all from me, and how long are we? Now we're 44 in. But a lot of it's filler from me being mostly silent. So I'm going to probably make this a bit longer than Immortal's last one. Considering we only got through 3 of us. So to kind of speed run this a bit, the 4th one is... No, wait. Yeah. That was him? Yeah, it was him. So the 4th one is Karuto Inoshima. He's from the Danganronpa universe. Now he has a brother named Yame. For those of you who have seen Danganronpa, I will say Koru is kind of like the protagonist for that, while Yame is the antagonist and mastermind. Except Yame is essentially his conscience was put into Monokuma, which makes him the one who kind of made the he's the voice of Monokuma, basically. He more or less signed away the rights to his voice, similar to, if you watch Fallout, it's similar to the guy who did the Mr. Handy thing in that suit, in the actual animated show. Kind of that, basically, is what he did. Unknowing what exactly it was, well, no, I shouldn't even say unknowing. He knew full well what it was. He helped create some of the punishments himself, after all. And is actually one who still designs some in Immortalia. Though none of them are used in Immortalia, except for on vestiges and such that do not feel anything. But it's kind of just that. He's a force of chaos that loves to cause fear and pain to people, and gets a kick out of scaring others with his very dark humor. Anyways, Yame and Koru eventually do go to Hope's Peak. So, yes, we do follow the main storyline. Except we aren't following the, I believe it's Trigger Happy Havoc it's called, for the first Danganronpa game. More or less, Yame's conscience becomes Monokuma, so he's present in every one of them, but is never actually there. He more or less it's weird with how it is. I know he's claimed to be married to Junko, but I take that claim with a grain of salt. In both his personality and all the other lies he likes to do to ensure someone's in despair or fear. But anyways, I'm talking too much about Yame without talking about the actual person who had Kaze. My goodness. Anyways, the next person who had Koru was the one who had Kaze. But his whole thing was just stopping Yame and bringing hope back to the world after the most despair-inducing event the world had ever seen. Now, for those who are Danganronpa fans, I know that's not it. That's how I remember it. I know what you in the comments are about to say. Oh, it's going to be yada yada yada. Shush. I'm aware. I don't care. It's just how I remember the name and how I remember the event. But eventually, Koru and Yame come to a head and end up having Koru absorb Yame into Kaze in order to prevent him from doing any more harm. Which was smart on his part, but I know it hurt him a lot to have to watch his brother become just a conscience, and then to have to force that conscience upon someone else. So, Koru was the one who had held Kaze the longest, because he felt bad for forcing it upon someone else. So he ensured that Yep, there we go. So he eventually had to live with Yame for so long. He saw the rise and fall of various nations. Also, for those of you who know about Darlie and the Franks, that is something that he went through. He lived through it, essentially. In a different dome. We immortals kind of exist in our own space. We are present in the worlds, but we are not a key part in any of the actual storylines that one would see in your realm. That is not to say that we didn't exist at all, though. Alright, now it's time to build this wraparound porch. I'm sure Immortal will like it. But then, because I know this is probably hitting the 50-minute mark, in which we don't want to have happen. Well, we don't want it to heavily stay on. But then we'll go on to the My Hero Academia area, or point in time, with a boy named Karuto Refuto. He's kind of a descendant of Coulson, but also a descendant of Kurame. Essentially, to go quick on it, Coulson's descendants and Kurame's very distant descendants eventually meet up and then fall in love and yada yada yada. But Karuto was born quirkless in the My Hero Academia world, so had a similar thing to Izuku Midoriya, but he didn't have a mother who had actually cared about him. Both of his parents were very bad people. They were considered to be the top hero duo in the world, but top hero couple in the world, I believe is how I was told about it. But they had focused so much on trying to have their son become such a good hero that when they found out he was quirkless, they shunned him and just treated him less like their child each day and more like a servant. Till eventually they sold him off to a lab. Now, the price range Koruto has tried to forget, but I know it was a couple million yen, from what I recall. But, anyways, there, Koruto is experimented on and directly injected with Kaze. After them having found the scythe as an old relic and finding Kaze's drip out of the scythe when they try to cut into the handle, or when the handle accidentally got cut with something. I don't recall much of what was used to cut it before you start asking, so no. My answer is, it just got cut by something. Anyways, then what happened was Koruto had to deal with everyone's thoughts. Everyone that I've mentioned so far. It's a very trying process when you first connect to Kaze. Because all of our consciences, mine, Coulson, Kurame, Koru, Yame, we are all inside of Kaze. Similar to how the one for all vestiges work, in a way. Our collective conscience is stored within Kaze. Which kind of makes it difficult for the new person for the first couple of days to be able to filter their own thoughts with ours. So we tend to try and be quiet as much as possible and only speak when they are able to need our assistance or ask for us by name. It's kind of an unspoken rule that we all have developed. But anyways. Ow. With each of us having our own experiences and such, we can then pass them on to the new user. So, learn from the mistakes of those before you, so to speak. That kind of thing. In which we have helped Karuto escape the lab he was in. Find a way to survive out on the streets with little to nothing to his name. And become a hero. Hazita is a 10 UA, and he actually gets into Class 1A, but as kind of like one of those background characters you don't really notice. Well, technically he's there along the story and gets his big fight against overhaul. But other than that, it's mainly just him trying to survive. Also, one thing I should mention, while he was on the street, he was taken in by Dabi and Toga. Toga and Dabi acting like siblings. And also, then there is the fact that they kind of went their separate ways after Dabi and Toga joined the League of Villains to allow Karuto to become a hero and not worry about his ties to them. They essentially severed contact, but they meet up whenever there's nothing happening and during summer break. And then there is the then after that, to just kind of speed run this a bit more, there is McCready. He's our last one. He's actually set in Borderlands. If he was to be a playable character, he'd be known as the Bounty Hunter. Or a Bounty Hunter. He favors Jacob's weapons greatly. He uses Kaze to catch his targets and hold them down and tie them up. He's very much so able to... He's very big on the movement and just jumping around, ducking for cover, as well as quick drawing against them. So, like, he shoots and does, like, a quick headshot for one of his ultimates, or abilities. I more or less thought about him with the Borderlands 3 UI and playstyle in mind. Or gameplay in mind, so I've not played Borderlands 4 yet, sadly. But anyways, he more or less is a Vault Hunter, does all the Vault Hunter stuff, and that's the last one. Thank you all for... one second, let me finish this port, or at least finish this porch while I kind of talk to y'all and say bye. So, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Immortal Tales. For those on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. And for those on Spotify, be sure to follow. I'll try Immortal and me and all the others will try to post monthly. Depends on if we feel like doing it. But for the most part, we will post it monthly. To try and at least satisfy our viewers and not keep them in suspense for too long. Until then, bye.